TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut and welcome back to Intro to Photoshop. In the last 2 episodes, we have learned how to manipulate images. We have learned the difference between rasterized layers and smart object layers. We've learned about groups. We've learned about effects. We've learned about all sorts of lovely stuff that's gotten us to where we are with our design at the moment. The next thing we're going to start talking about is blending modes, which is possibly one of the most important things you can learn about in Photoshop. And this is basically how whatever layer you're working on, how that layer is going to interact with the other layers around it, okay? The simplest way to explain this is just to simply do it. So we're going to grab our shape tool and we're going to work with these shape tools and with the blending modes in the same time. Okay. Now, in your toolbar, the eagle-eyed among you might have noticed that some of these icons, or indeed most of these icons, have actually got a little tiny arrow in the bottom right corner. And what this means is if you long press or click and hold on any of these, a little sub-menu is going to appear. And when you release on any one of these sub-tools, it will make that the tool within the panel. For example, on the shape tool, it's going to be the rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon line, or custom shape tool. For now, we want to leave it on rectangle, but have a bit of an explore and see what other things you've got here, like the lasso tool, for example, which does exactly the same as the marquee tool, but you can draw any shape that you want. Same thing with the polygonal lasso tool, apart from you just click points and it creates straight lines in between, that sort of thing. Okay, have a bit of a play through here, see what's going on. What we need for now, though, is the rectangle tool. The rectangle tool in terms of drawing works exactly the same as the marquee tool. Click and drag to draw a shape, hold Alt to scale from the middle, hold Shift to scale proportionately. Okay, I'm going to make a perfect square, about 500 pixels or so. Okay. Now, when you have a shape layer selected and the shape tool selected within your palette, your contextual menu up in the top left here is going to change a little bit, okay? You're going to get things like fill, stroke, pixel width of the stroke, width and height of your object, things like that, okay? What we're going to worry about now is the fill and stroke. I just want this to be red, and you can see that I've got some swatches set up, but when you click this, you might not. What you can do if you want to click a completely personal color is choose your color picker, and you can go through and just pick any one that you want. I'm going to choose a nice bright red, maybe something like this, maybe a bit richer than that. Maybe there, that'll do. Hit OK. That's going to change the fill of our rectangle to be that color. If I apply a stroke, for example, I can change the thickness of that stroke to maybe 100. Yep, and that's just going to draw a line around that box. Again, I encourage you to have a play with these little tools here. They can be quite powerful. For now, I just want a red square, okay? So I'm going to go to my move tool and I'm going to use that to position that red square over our man's face, okay? Like that, about there, just so that his mouth peeks out. That'll do. Now that we've drawn a shape, okay, and we'll go into detail on the rest of these shapes later, but for now I want to talk about blending modes. Now that we have this shape and our shape selected in the layer palette, up at the top of the layer palette, you'll see a blending mode option, which probably says normal, okay? If you click on that, there's going to be a whole bunch of different options. Now, trying to explain how these work is a bit difficult. Some of them I understand, others I just know what they do without being able to explain physically what they're doing. So I'm going to do the best I can. But the best way to actually click these and scroll through them and see what they do is to select the layer like this and then just start hitting up and down. Okay, so you can see that if you're clicking up and down, not only is it changing here, it's affecting how that layer interacts with the other layers around it. Okay. And I'll take you through them one by one. So normal is exactly what it means. However you draw that shape, whatever the fill, stroke, gradient properties that you've got in there are, it's going to replicate that exactly. As you start moving between these, you'll start to see them interact differently. Darken, for example, multiply basically allows anything that is any black to come through and any white to be blocked. So any darker areas is going to shine through our light here. Color burn essentially takes whatever the strongest color of the shape is, and again, if it's darker, removes it. If it's lighter, allows it through, but in a completely different way. You'll see what I mean about explaining how these work. It's kind of difficult. Screen does the opposite of multiply, for example. It allows the white through. But just have a flick through these and see how they interact with your image, what one looks the coolest. I was going to choose multiply, for example, for this one. There it is. But on closer inspection, I think I prefer the look of overlay, or perhaps even pin light. But I think I'm going to stick with overlay for this one. What I wanted was a red hue over this guy that really highlights the brightness of his blindfold. So it looks like he's a bit of a target, a sacrificial kind of target, because that's what it looks like in the water, in the robes and everything like that. So that's what I wanted to highlight in this design. What I might do is just make it a bit smaller so it doesn't overlap the edges of our rectangle, and just bring it over to the center of his face a bit more. Now at this point you can start doing really whatever you want. It's completely up to you. I'm probably going to leave it maybe like that. So here at the moment I'm just hitting Control T, and then I'm just messing around with the different shapes that I've got going on. Okay, I'm going to maybe bring this up a bit just so it's covering his chin. Okay, something like that. Have a flick through these different settings here, see what one looks like, and start to try and understand what they do. Next to this, you've got opacity and fill. Opacity can controls the entire see-throughness of the layer, for example. So maybe I'd want to set that a bit lower to about 90, just to take the edge off a little bit. Fill affects any of the visible elements, but not any effects or layer styles, I believe. For example, if I created a blue rectangle with a drop shadow applied, okay, if I reduce the opacity of this layer, it would reduce the opacity of everything all the way down. If I reduce the fill opacity of this layer, it would leave the drop shadow in effect whilst removing the physical element from the layer. So you can start to do things where it only has a drop shadow applied with no actual effect and things like that. Quite cool and interesting. Something to have a bit of a play around with. For now, though, we're going to start working with the shape tools. And then we're going to move on to text after that. And then I'm just going to briefly take you through some other tools, but not really affect the design with them. I'm just going to mess around and see what we come up with. Okay. So I'm going to grab our rectangle tool and I'm going to make it white, white fill and no stroke. And I'm going to start drawing some shapes. So I want some very small rectangles, maybe 60 pixels-ish. Okay, then I'm going to hit Control T and I'm going to rotate that whilst holding Shift so that it rotates in increments, to about 45 degrees. So I get a little diamond, okay? And then I'm going to start trying to position these around our square here. I'm going to need 4 of them, so I'm going to duplicate that layer 3 times with Control J. So I get 4 of these diamonds, just to show you that there's 4 there. I'll just move them around a little bit, okay? Before I start using those, I'm going to need a box around here. So to do that, I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to hold Alt and Shift as I do it to create a square. I'm going to hold it roughly in the middle so that I get it roughly correct, like so. However, I'm then going to use my Move tool to snap this with the Smart Guides to the direct middle of our composition, like so. But I don't want a fill on this one. I just want a stroke. So I'm going to select my rectangle tool. I'm going to click on the fill here and just remove it to this one with a red line through, which means none. I'm going to take our stroke and I'm going to give it a white stroke. 30 might be a bit thick. Okay, so maybe I'm going to reduce it down to say 15. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Okay. There's some other options that you can mess around with up here, like aligning. So you can align things to the canvas. So left, up, right, top, down, middle. So I can start shifting my object around. However, I want it to be horizontally centered and vertically centered as well. So if you're having trouble with Smart Guides because you've got a lot of stuff going on in your canvas, you could align things like that. Okay. And we're going to leave it there. I think I'm happy with that. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to position all of my diamonds on the corner of this rectangle. In fact, I'm going to reduce it first to 10 pixels, and then I'm going to do that. However, say, for example, this was getting very complicated. I don't want to go through here and start trying to find my diamonds. I'm like, okay, so this is, double click and we'll call this one the box. This one is, a diamond. You should stay on top of your layer naming. However, a really simple and quick shortcut is if you see an element on your page and you want to directly select it in your layer palette, okay, all you need to do is hit Control and hover over the element, and it will start to show you a box around it. If you click it, then it will select that in your layer palette. Whereas if I click something and select it without hitting that control button, then it won't actually change the layer that you've got selected in here. If you do want that behavior, if you do want to select something directly by just clicking it, with the move tool selected, all you've got to do is click on auto select up here. And then when you click and start moving things around, you'll be able to directly select them. This may seem like the better option, but I really don't like it because you can quickly start to break and accidentally move the wrong thing. I like to make sure that I can hold control, highlight the object I want to move, and then just click and drag it around, okay? And what I'm actually going to do is line up the center of these squares with the edge of our rectangle here. So I'm going to bring it in, I'm going to position it roughly in place, and then I'm just going to line it like so. And then using the space bar and clicking and dragging, and then control clicking our elements, I'm just going to line the rest of these as well. So we're going to come in like so, shift that one into position. Again, zooming with Alt and the scroll wheel, selecting with Control click, panning with space. So it may seem easier to just draw these and pop them in position, but I suggest that you use this as an opportunity to get used to using pan, zoom, rotate, whatever you need to get these in position, because it's really going to do you well to learn how those tools work. Okay, so we've drawn our little box here, but I think it's going to look a bit better if we offset it. So I want to rotate all of these objects as a whole. So if I go and hit Control T, I'm only going to actually rotate the one layer that I'm on, which is no good. We don't want that. We want to rotate them all. You can do that by selecting all of these layers and then hitting Control T, and that will rotate everything. But each time you do that, you then got to select all those layers again. So instead, let's pop them into a group. You can do that with Control G, or you can select all your layers and then click the folder icon down here. Now all we've got to do, we'll just call this one box, is hit Control T once on the folder and we control everything. If I click and drag, I can just spin this around. If I click and drag and hold shift, I can spin it around in equal increments. Like for example, 135 or 45 degrees. That makes it a nice diamond for us there. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that, but I want to put a few more elements in. Okay, I'm going to go over to our shape layer here. I'm going to click and hold until it's a circle or ellipse. Okay, and I'm going to start drawing some shapes in. I'm going to draw some nice little circles like so. And I'm going to come back to my polygon tool and I'm going to see how many sides my shape has. At the moment, it has 3. Okay, if you want to increase your polygon to, a octagon or a dodecahedron or something like that, all you need to do is, whilst you're clicking and dragging to make your shape, is hold shift and then just press up or down. Oh, no, excuse me, that is Illustrator. What a foolish error. You need to go up to the sides palette here, and you can just change the number of sides and then draw a shape, and that'll increase it. I really thought you could press shift up or down, but that must just be an Illustrator trick. So forgive me for that. That is my error entirely. What I want is a triangle, however. So I just want 3 sides on my shape, and I'm just going to make it roughly the same size as this circle, like so. And I'm going to call it a job well done. However, if I wanted them to be exactly the same size, it's really easy. I can control click my circle and it's 98 by 98 pixels. Let's make that an even 100. Okay. I can then control click my triangle and come up here and do the same thing. This is 110 by 95 in height, and I'm going to make it 100 by 100. And that way it's a nice equilateral triangle. Okay. Actually, I think it's slightly isosceles, but that's okay. Those are a little bit too big, but now that they're the same size, I can just shrink them down a little bit. Okay, and I can start positioning these on my page. What I want is, if I control click the circle, I'm not sure what I really want with these here, but let's figure it out. Maybe I want them going directly down the middle in an alternating pattern. So I can select that shape, but as you can see, I'm starting to have a bit of trouble with my smart guides because it's trying to snap to all these corners here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is duplicate the ellipse a bunch of times. I'm going to duplicate it with Control J, and then I'm going to shift and press the arrow keys to move that around quickly. And I'm just going to duplicate this a few times. Maybe let's have 4 of them. Yep. I'm then going to click this and start spacing them out a little bit more with control clicking. Then I'm going to control click my triangle. I'm going to put him roughly in position, and I'm going to do the same thing. Control J, I'm going to shift him down. Control J, I'm going to shift him down. So now I've got 4 circles and 3 triangles, but I want them to be equally spaced and completely on the center line. Now, you could do that manually, but it would take you forever. So what I've done is I've set up all these layers so that they're all on top of each other. And I'm going to select the bottom circle, and I'm going to shift that into where I want the line of shapes to stop, probably in line with the middle of this bit here. And I'm going to take the first shape here, and I'm going to shift that until it's in line with the middle of the line here. And then I'm going to give this one just a little bit of breathing room. Okay. I'm then going to select all of my shapes. And when I do, you'll notice that these options along the top, these align options, become visible. And if you hover over them, they'll tell you what they do, like align top edges, align vertical centers, etc. We're going to align the horizontal centers of these shapes. So there wasn't much in them, but that's just put them perfectly in line with each other. And then we're going to use distribute, which is a bit of a stronger tool. I'm going to distribute horizontally, which means actually technically distributing their vertical centers until all those lines of all those shapes are equidistant apart. Okay, that's just a really quick way to align shapes together. I'm going to group these, and then I'm going to change their layer style to something else because I think it looks a bit silly having them being white. I think maybe soft light could look good. Let's try soft light. Let's make them black and try multiply. So with that folder selected, I'm going to twirl that folder down, select all of my shapes and make them black. And then I'm going to have the folder selected and change that to multiply, color burn, linear burn, darker color. See what works. Soft light works. There you go. I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty cool. So you can see that you can create shapes pretty easily. You can manipulate those shapes on the stage pretty easily. You can group things. You can rotate, skew, scale, etc., etc. Okay. Really, the last basic thing that you need to know about is working with the pen tool, working with the text tool, and seeing what the smudge and burn and dodge tools can do to a rasterized image. So we're not going to actually keep any of these effects on our latest image here, unless you want to, but I am going to quickly show you how they work. So I'm going to duplicate our layer, and I'm just going to push that to the top of our stack. Now I can click and drag to rearrange, okay? Or I can hit Control and open and close square bracket to push this around in our stack. I'm going to push it right to the top. Then most of these tools work better on rasterized layers. So I'm going to right click and rasterize that. Okay, and I'm going to take you through a few of these tools. There are some that I'm going to ignore because they're not really for beginners. If you want to see specialized tutorials in any of these tools, let me know. I'll probably do one on like the clone stamp tool, for example, the pen tool, things like that. Firstly, we can take a look at the gradient tool. The gradient tool generates a gradient. You click and drag the start and end point of your gradient, and it draws that picture on whatever layer you've got. You can choose the colors, the start and end point of your gradient, by selecting them from the menu, like so, and clicking and dragging. It's nice and simple, okay? This can be good for creating nice overlay effects. Like, for example, if I dragged like this, like so, all the way through, and I chose maybe, actually, no, those colors are quite nice. Let's keep those. I can then start messing around with these blending modes to apply some really nice effects. Multiply works well, for example. If I then take this layer and I reduce its opacity a little bit, maybe I could try screen. And that's added a nice bit of haze to our entire image. It gives it a little bit of nice color, okay? Which I quite like. So we're actually going to keep that. What we're going to do instead is to duplicate this. Maybe we'll put our haze below our rectangles so they're not actually affecting those shapes. Although, I don't know. I quite like it on top. Let's leave it on top all the way. And let's start manipulating a spare copy of our man. So right click and rasterize. See, right there was an exact benefit of messing around. So when I told you to go and have a play with all those effects, I didn't plan at all to keep that gradient in there, but I really like the way it looks. And I only figured that out because I went and had a bit of a play around, okay? So make sure you do. Let's look at the Smudge Tool, for example. If you have a sharpen or a blur tool, that's all under the same submenu. Blur literally does what it says on the tin. If you sort of scroll around a little bit, you can see that you're starting to blur your guy's face. If I'm just really going to start going for it, like so, you can see you can generate a bit of a blur. Okay. Sharpen does the opposite of that. It takes an area of an image and really defines, if I really go for it, really defines any creases that you can see in the image. So say, for example, if I wanted to keep that in my image as well, I could quickly run my hand over the cloth, okay, and it's going to start to bring out some of the creases in the cloth more. You do need a light touch with these tools, though, because too much can be really bad. You can see really subtle effects there. Yeah, okay. The last one is the Smudge Tool, and that does exactly what it says on the tin. You can smudge a little bit. Be careful with this, because if you do too much in one click, then it can take ages to figure out what the hell it's doing with itself. And remember that this is destructive. You can't bring that back, okay? Burn and dodge do exactly what they sound like. Burn takes any part of your image and darkens it up a bit. So you can use it well for reducing camera shine. So say you get some shine on his muscles here, you can burn those out a little bit. So you can see the difference there. Dodge does the absolute opposite. It brings in highlights. So I can start to increase like so. Okay. Again, a light touch is needed with these tools. The one that I really want to talk about is the pen tool, because say, for example, you're trying to select something with a lasso tool and you want to cut this guy's head off, you know, and then bam, like that. That can become really difficult to control. The pen tool does take a while to master, so don't worry if you struggle with it. But essentially you can create points where you can cut out or create a path for certain elements. Say, for example, I didn't like this guy's blindfold. I can click to create a point. And then if I click and drag on the next point, I can create a curved line between those 2 points. And if you've got a lot of patience, you can use this just by clicking and dragging to make really neat lines around things, okay? A few nice tips with this is when you click and drag, you're left with 2 handles, okay? If you want to edit those handles, you need to hold Control, and then you can start to manipulate those handles. If you want to change just one handle by itself, you can hold Alt and do the same thing, and that will drastically change the corner points. For example, if I click here and then click and drag and then click here, that's going to create a curved line because of the influence of this handle. That's pushing it all the way out and then bringing it back round. If I wanted this to be a sharp corner, I could hold Alt, change that handle to be the direction I want, click, it then becomes a sharp corner, okay? So you can use this in a really good combination of ways to start cutting out objects with a great deal of accuracy, okay? So I'll just quickly finish this one off like so. It's not going to be absolutely neat, but it's going to be good enough for illustrative purposes. So you can see that I use the pen tool quite a lot, so I'm sort of all right with it, but you will definitely need some practice with this tool to get the best out of it. Okay, once you have that path, okay, you can right click and turn it to a selection, which turns it into a lasso path. You can then delete, you know, that area of the path that you made, or you can right click and fill your path. So you can choose a color and just fill your path with that color. Really cool, really powerful stuff. Okay, that is probably all I'm going to go through with the rest of these. We'll leave clone stamp and things like the healing brush to a separate tutorial. If you want one on those, let me know, but there's plenty out there on YouTube. They are just a bit involved and not really for beginners. Let's delete this layer. And the last thing I'm going to do for my design is give it a title. Okay, and we need to do that with the text tool. If you select your text tool, left click, you can start typing. It's very small at the moment though, so you should have a character window. If you don't see that, again, go to window and then characters. And here you can manipulate your text however you like. You can increase the size. If you had 2 lines, you can increase the distance between those lines. You can increase the distance between characters. You can decrease that, you know. You can shift characters off of their baseline or up and down from their baseline as well. You can change the color of the text. Okay, if you have all your text selected, you have a contextual menu up here. You can change the color of it, maybe to white. Maybe you could sample a color from the background, maybe like this. Maybe you could push this text below everything and then just have some random gibberish in the background. That doesn't look too bad. Let's make that screen. Let's make it multiply. Let's make it darken. All looks good. Multiply looks good. Let's reduce the opacity of that. There you go. Leave that in the background. Duplicate that layer. Start putting it around down here as well. All sorts of stuff. What we're going to do, however, is create a title for this guy. And we're going to call him Red Zone. That's a good one. I'm going to give it white text for now. And I'm going to increase the size of this so you can manipulate with Control T like you can everything else. I'm going to use Control close square bracket to push it to the top. And I'm going to put this title in the middle of our page. As you can see, the smart guides are playing up a little bit, but you should be able to sort of smudge it in there. And that looks good to me. We won't leave it white, however. For this one, we can just, let's sample one of these reds and see what that looks like. Not too bad. Let's bring it up a little bit. It looks good, but it's maybe a little bit hard to read. So let's apply some effects to it and make it a bit easier. Like, for example, a drop shadow that we made earlier. But let's bring the size of it down to 0, increase the distance to about 10, and that's going to give us a nice little shadow on that text there. Okay. Text tools are pretty simple. They work in pretty much the same way as Word, PowerPoint, all that sort of stuff. Really easy to work with. I'm pretty happy with this. I'm not sure I like the color of this text though. What I might do is make it the same red as that square was earlier. Maybe I'll make it white again. Maybe I'll leave it white. I think white works well. Maybe it wants to go at the bottom. Maybe it wants to go at the top. I think it wants to go, yeah, I think it wants to go at the top. Or we can do what I did on my other designs and we can have it just be nestled away in the corner up here. Okay, red zone like that. Who knows? It's completely up to you. That is pretty much it though for Intro to Photoshop. You can see we've done a lot of cool stuff here. Manipulated images, created shapes, created text, learned about layer styles, learned about blending modes, but we really have only scratched the surface. So what I really need from you guys is some feedback on what you want to see from Photoshop tutorials, because I've had a lot of requests for them, but people just say, you know, Photoshop tutorial. They don't tell me what they want to know, what they want to see from me. So let me know what you do want to see in the comments on our Discord channel, which there's a link to in the description. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Let me know, get it out there, and I'll do my best to make a tutorial on it. So thanks very much for watching, everybody. I hope you have enjoyed this series. If you had, great. If you haven't, I'm sorry. Maybe I can do it next time a bit better. In the meantime, though, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for liking, commenting, subscribing, etc. All that jazz. And I'll see you next time on whatever the next tutorial is from TipTut. I'll see you then.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.